Cool. All right, well, it's 4 o'clock, 4:01, and I see people are still joining us, but I think we'll go ahead and get started here. Hello, everyone. My name is Rowan Walrath, and I am the editor of Rhode Island Inno. If you're not familiar with us, we are a news and events platform dedicated to covering startups and innovation across the Ocean State. We're part of American Inno, which is a larger network of 14 markets and growing that catalyzes innovation nationwide. And here in Rhode Island, we do that in a couple of ways. First, and I would say the foremost, is through The Beat, your source for local innovation. Love my prop here. And it's a newsletter that goes out every Tuesday afternoon. I curate and write it, and you should consider it your one-stop shop for everything happening in the Rhode Island startup scene. You can sign up for The Beat by going to rhodeislandinno.com, and there you can also read our original coverage of local startups, fundraising, M&A news, everything that is impacting the startup community. And we also try to catalyze innovation and connect folks through events like this one. So this is our first virtual Startups to Watch. This is the online version of an event that we put on every year. So every December, we post our annual Startups to Watch list, which is a collection of early stage companies in Rhode Island that we anticipate big things coming out of in the next 12 months and beyond. Our virtual event will feature a panel discussion with several leaders from the selected startups. As we're talking, please remember to send in any questions you have for your panelists or myself in the question box, which is in your control panel to the right. We will try our best to answer as many as possible after the panel discussion. Lastly, we wouldn't be able to do what we do at Rhode Island Inno without the support of our amazing founding and event partners, Cox, Amica, and Sprout Coworking. Thank you all so much for helping us out. All right, without further ado, I will kick it to the panelists. Each of you can introduce yourselves.
Hi, well, I'll get started if we're not going in any particular order. I'm Liz Hamburg. I'm the founder of Candoo Tech, and I'm really excited to be here. Thank you guys so much. It's a big honor. I've been involved with Rhode Island for many, many years, and so this is wonderful to be part of this. At Candoo Tech, we'll talk a little bit more about what we do, but quickly, we are providing tech support and training specifically designed to help older adults stay independent, safe, and connected. So now more than ever, there's a real need for it, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
I'm Robbie Felton, founder of Intus Care. What we do at Intus Care is empower long-term care providers to take care of their patients through data. And I'm excited to be here with my two other panelists that I know pretty well. Had a great conversation with Adam yesterday, and thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining.
Super glad to be here. Hi, everyone. My name's Adam Alpert, and I believe Rhode Island's a great place to start your startup and business. I'm one of the co-founders of Pangea.app, and what we are doing is fundamentally reimagining how companies find and work with college talent. It's really our mission to unleash the world of college talent for who we call the Fortune 5 million, the 5 million employers in the US.
Awesome. Super glad to have you all join us here. So we'll kick it off with a question that I really like asking folks. So all of y'all are officially Startups to Watch in 2020. Now, if you look back to when you were first starting out your company, what companies inspired you? Or in other words, what startups were you watching?
Guys,
Liz,
you want to take that one first, or you want me to start? Absolutely. Well, you know, I've been watching startups for a long time. I've been an entrepreneur for over 20 years now. And so I've been starting up companies, mentoring others, in fact, very involved with the Brown Entrepreneurship Program. So I want to give a big shout out to these guys too, because I know that they came out of that program. And it's wonderful to see what you've done. So, you know, I really get my influence and inspiration from a variety of companies. I mean, I'm always inspired by watching young entrepreneurs and what they've been doing. And, you know, what I've been seeing when I started Candoo Tech, I was really focused on customer service and making sure that it was an excellent experience. So I really keep a close eye on companies that I find to be really inspiring with that customer service. So I will say companies like Athleta, even though they're part of Gap, they sort of started off with that small mentality. Zappos before they got bought by Amazon. There's a wonderful book actually by Tony Hsieh, their founder, about how they literally had a customer service person deliver a pizza to a customer calling about ordering shoes because they were hungry, and and they were asking about where to get a pizza delivered. So I really get inspired by excellent customer service and by companies that go above and beyond to make sure that customers are satisfied.
For me, starting off, we were looking at a lot of other healthcare providers, digital health startups. Specific startup that I've looked at a lot for kind of guidance in terms of looking at their experience in past was Meduma. They were purchased by Philips, or acquired by Philips a couple of years, or last year actually. And I just took a lot of inspiration from hearing from their CPO at a Brown event, an entrepreneurship event, and just hearing about how they go about interface, go about customer engagement from the provider side and on the patient side, really helped inform kind of the way we started to build our company and looking at how we move forward.
I'd say that there were two companies that really inspired me from an early stage. The first is a company founded by several RISD grads, and that was Airbnb. Brian Chesky and Joe Gebbia both went to RISD, so they were like, walk down College Hill and we're on Benefit Street, and like, right there. And obviously, in the time that I was kind of emerging and starting to build Pangea, Airbnb was taking off. So, and for me, I looked at them, they're a marketplace. I remember in my first real week of graduating from Brown and going through B-Lab, Joe Gebbia actually came to Rhode Island and gave a talk, with the governor and Stephen Pryor, and I was there in that room. It was a conference center downtown, the Dunk. And he was talking a lot about micro entrepreneurship and marketplaces, and a lot of that was really inspiring for us. And I went and met him afterwards, and we emailed a couple of times. But to this day, I look at Airbnb and Brian Chesky in particular as like a moral guide in terms of look at how they've handled everything recently with COVID, the layoffs, dealing with their hosts. They've gone through so much. They went super huge, big down, back up again. And whenever I find myself in some kind of moral quandary in terms of like, how do I communicate this change in our business? I ask myself, what would Brian Chesky do? How would Airbnb handle this? Because they've set such an amazing standard in terms of how they treat their employees and how they treat their end users. And I just think I try to become kind of the person that Brian Chesky is. Now, on a real kind of micro level, there was an entrepreneur that kind of preceded me from Brown, and his name was Albie Brown, and he was the founder of Spotter. It was a kind of like a marketplace for parking spaces. And when I was a senior, he had just spent a year he was like the first one that I ever saw come out of Brown and try to actually start something instead of taking a job elsewhere. And I saw him and his co-founder grind, and Albie, literally what he had done is he went on Craigslist and he found like a sailboat, and he lived in the shell of a sailboat for like super cheap. And like, that's how he made it work. And I remember like getting drinks with him at Captain Seaweeds throughout the year. And he was the one who really inspired me to kind of take that leap and say, you know what, I'm going to try to make something work when I graduate. And we got into B-Lab, we were able to raise a little bit of funding, and I've just stayed super persistent all the way through. So I'd say those are the two startups that I was watching then and frankly still watch to today.
Very cool. Thank you all so much. Those are, I feel like, runs the gamut here. And Airbnb, of course, has an amazing founding story. Adam, I think you and I were both at the Mass Challenge Awards last year when they keynoted. Yep, very cool. All right. So if you had to look back at 2019, which I realize that for pretty much all of us seems like a million years ago, what would you say was one business decision that marked that year as a milestone for your company?
Yeah, so for us, we actually launched Candoo Tech in 2019. So the biggest business decision was let's launch. But I think that as we thought about how we were going to launch, and again, we'll talk about what's happened fast forward to this year. But we really took to heart this idea of fast failure and doing the kind of using a lean startup mentality of really just trying things, putting things out there really, really quickly. building something, getting feedback, making tweaks, and then and then continuing to iterate. And I think that having been an entrepreneur for a long time, where this was something where it used to take a year to get a product out, and a lot of money and a lot of development, and then you get something out and, oh my God, it wasn't quite the right thing, and you'd have to start from square one. And so to me, that was something that was really exciting, was being able to literally get a website up within a week, and then make tweaks to it the minute that we found that things needed to be updated.
Like Liz, ours was starting the company. So we had to make that decision of, are we going to take this seriously? Are we going to do this full time? So we kind of walked along that path for the first half or 3/4 of 2019 of being students as well as entrepreneurs. And then near the end, we realized, okay, we're in love with the problem. We're passionate about the solution we're building. So let's make this dive into running this and being entrepreneurs full-time, focused on Intus Care. So we decided to leave school, raise funding, and stay here in Rhode Island and build our business.
Big leap.
Most definitely.
So I think if we go to 2019, I go back to literally like a year ago to the day, maybe minus a week. We had one of the hardest moments in Pangea history, which was we had been undergoing a pivot. We were in Mass Challenge. We were making progress, but we weren't quite there yet. And navigating a pivot's really messy. The destination's changing, everything, business model's changing, the narrative is changing. There's just so much kind of up in the air. And it was really, there were like 3 people in the company that were like critical. Me, my co-founder, we had a third person who was like critical, and she ended up leaving in that time because this wasn't clicking for her. And it was like losing a limb. Imagine you're a tripod and you lose a limb, and it's like, how we can't stand up anymore. And I remember sitting on the newly opened Providence Bridge, the pedestrian bridge outside the CIC, and sitting there with my co-founder, and it was like one of the lowest points of my life of just being like, how do we move forward from here? Like, we just lost a limb, school starts in 4 weeks, our product's not there, there's no way we're gonna get it out in time. And it was, and like, we're running out of cash like crazy. We had maybe like $2,000 in the bank. We weren't taking salaries. And it was this closest I think we've ever been to giving up. In that moment, it was like, is this it? We've been working now for 18 months. Is this the end of the road? And in that moment, we resolved ourselves saying, no, you know what? We have another 45 days left of Mass Challenge. We can pull this together. Like, we've been put so much heart and soul into this. And yes, we're like so close to failing. You're always one step away from failure, but we were the closest we had ever been to succeeding at the same exact time. And in that moment, we kind of set milestones for ourselves, and we started navigating towards those milestones. And we said, you know what, we're taking it one day at a time, 1 week at a time. Let's have a 45-day horizon here. Let's go finish Mass Challenge super strong. And we ended up making it onto the main stage right next to Robbie and his co-founders, and presented in front of 2,000 people, and that was a really invigorating experience. And we didn't even win a prize, but we had gotten the business to a place that we said, you know what, we're seeing enough momentum, enough progress. Let's extend this until May of 2020. We have enough money we can string by until then, and by then we have to either raise a pre-seed round and/or do X, Y, and Z. And we ended up being successful in raising a pre-seed round 2 months later, and now we're just like leagues ahead of where we were 365 days ago. Don't give up.
So Adam, you're sitting there, you're at your lowest point. I mean, what was it that made you and your team decide to move forward and stick with it?
Brian Chesky. Seriously, go back to Airbnb, right? So the kind of the story of how Airbnb got in the YC is they went into the YC interview. You have 15 minutes to impress the partners you're talking to, and they walked out of the room and they weren't feeling it. And as someone who went through a YC interview, like you maybe just missed your mark. And what they did is they ended up, Brian Chesky pulls out of his backpack a cereal box, And he runs back into the room with Paul Graham, who was a partner they had interviewed with, and he throws on the table Obama O's and Captain McCain's, which were the cereal that they launched when they were out of funding during the 2016 election or 2008 election. My apologies, to actually like validate that like they had something. And Paul Graham basically said, "You guys are cockroaches. You're not going to die. We're going to invest in you." And literally, Paul Graham invested in Airbnb when they were nothing, because he said they're going to find a way. And entrepreneurship really is a lot about persistence and not giving up. So in that moment, for my co-founder and myself, we said, we can't give up now. We're so close. And even in those moments where you feel that incredible self-doubt, we didn't stop believing in ourselves. And I think that was a really pivotal moment in terms of, you know, both the company development, but also in terms of our professional development, which is not letting self-doubt get in the way of truly and honestly just deciding to believe in yourself and giving it all that you got.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Cool. So I want you all to think about when you were setting your business goals for 2020. Obviously, things have probably changed a little bit since then. We're in the midst of a global pandemic. We're largely not meeting in person. I mean, this is a virtual event. The fundraising environment dipped for a bit there. Things are different in the startup world. How have you, as startup leaders, pivoted?
Yeah. Well, this is a really tough time for so many people. And, you know, we particularly were working with the elderly and most vulnerable populations. So we were doing in-person visits in the New York tri-state area and in New England, and starting to think about how do we expand into, we were going to go very strategically, very methodically into Florida and into Arizona, and think about our rollout plan in person. And in March, we stopped all of our in-person visits. We shut it down cold, and we'd been doing some remote tech support, mostly, you know, for our members, but we really weren't sure, frankly, how much we'd be able to do and how successful we would be. And so we started trying to do remote visits. They were going pretty well. And then we were really thankfully included in an article on the front page of the business section of the New York Times in late March. And that kind of catapulted us. All of a sudden, our phones started ringing from all over the country, and people started asking for remote visits. Adult children were calling saying they had their parents or grandparents stuck in, you know, isolated in senior living facilities or stuck at home, and they needed to get them. The only way to connect was really through technology. So we were kind of that pivotal connection and pivotal link. And our team of tech concierges were amazing. They very quickly learned to be able to communicate even more effectively, again, only remotely. And we had our signature moment when we taught a man who turned 105. It was actually on his birthday, and his daughter called and said she needed to get photos. He needed to email photos. He was stuck in an assisted living facility. She couldn't get in, and we taught him how to use his iPhone to take pictures and email them to his doctor. So, you know, we are now in 15 states. We're working with senior living facilities around the country. We're working with senior centers, offices of aging, healthcare facilities. And we really, in some ways, this has catapulted us to really accelerate a business plan that we thought would happen, you know, in kind of 2 to 5 years. All of a sudden has happened in 3 months.
Similarly, for us, working in the exact same space with elderly patients, we have found that this pandemic has increased awareness for our cause, because the most vulnerable people are those who are within facilities, nursing homes, adult daycare, assisted living, and those are our exact end users. So for us, being able to land multiple pilots, work with a lot of organizations over the past couple months, and looking forward in the future has been a very good validation for us internally and externally as well. And it's really reaffirmed our passion and keeps us moving towards the vision we see for our company and our product. So that's been what's really pivotal for us in 2020. And yeah.
I think, Rowan, really to your question is like how we change as leaders. founders of the company. I think for me, it's been like a big growth and learning how to really invest and trust in other people and learning how to manage a team. I mean, when it went beginning of the year, it was just my co-founder, myself, and we had a student from Johnson & Wales working with us like super part-time, Pangea. And now we're at 14. And if you were to include all of our sales reps and ambassadors, we're like close to 80. So how do you manage 80 people? How do you get 80 people kind of working in the same direction, let alone 14, or let alone like 5? So the first thing is like we made our first full-time hires. We hired a full-time product designer who just graduated from RISD, and we hired a full-time sales rep to help me deal with client inbound. She just graduated from Bryant. So we just hired 2 people, 2 jobs in Rhode Island. What to do? And the time it takes to get them onboarded and build that relationship and start to trust, because when you're the co-founder and you split it yin yang, and my co-founder deals with product and I deal with people, it's like learning how to start to share that responsibility has been a really big point of growth for me. And I was getting to a point probably in late April, May-ish, where it was just too much for me to handle. And I really had to start to elevate Casey and elevate some of the other students who are working with us part-time and start to invest in them and spend time training them in terms of how do you deal with a client, how do you deal with a customer support ticket, how do you interact with students, and start to invest in them, to empower them, allow them to grow, give them responsibility and invest in them so that it frees up some more of my time to be like, okay, now that these day-to-day things are handled, how do I keep all of us working together in the same direction? And we ended up doing a couple of things that I won't go into the details of logistically that have really kind of helped us along in terms of keeping the team moving together. But learning how to delegate, learning how to trust, and getting past this idea of if you want it done right, you have to do it yourself, because then you're so limited in terms of what your company and what your team can accomplish. I can only do so much. I only have so many hours in a day. So now that I spent the time investing in my team members, there's now 2 or 3x of me. And now the company as a whole is moving a lot faster than it ever could have if I had been overly controlling and not trusting. And I think that's made more difficult the fact that everything is remote. But we ended up making a full-time hire decision, the student out of RISD. I met him for the first time last week, and we've been working with him for 2 months. So learning how to build that trust, even in a remote environment, has been a unique challenge. But then again, it's all I really know. I'd be curious what it looks like when it's not remote.
Yeah, totally. Well, Robbie, maybe you will be able to answer that question, because I know that when we spoke earlier this spring, back when COVID was sort of starting to take over all of our lives, you told me that you and your co-founders were quarantined together for a little bit. What was that experience like?
It was a big learning experience. We were friends before co-founders, but never 24/7 roommates. So we were working and living out of the same space. But it really sounds cliche, but brought us together as a team. Now we know things we shouldn't know about each other. But it honestly, it allowed us to be so productive, hold each other accountable at all hours of the day. And I don't think without that experience we would be where we're at right now. So it definitely helped us grow. It helped us refine all aspects of our business. And it really taught us a little bit about each other.
Absolutely. And Liz, you are expanding Candoo Tech's systems nationally right now. What is it like to manage that from a single location?
Well, in some ways it gives us a lot of flexibility. I mean, I've managed teams before remotely, and I was prior to this, I was running a nonprofit with 5 offices around the country. So, we're sort of used to working in multiple time zones. So it hasn't been that different, but I will say what's sort of been nice about it is it's leveled the playing field. So before, when I've worked with teams remotely, I would have a team in my office in person, and then everyone else would be sort of satellite or remote. And I think now, since we're all remote and no one is together, it really kind of creates the shared experience and shared way to communicate. So in some ways, it'll be interesting to see when hopefully we're able to get back to some in person, what that means for the team. And I'm really thinking a lot about how do we keep up that real camaraderie and that feeling of all being in this together when some people will be together and other people will be remote. I think it's an interesting question that's happening all around the country. Is I was frankly a little bit old school in my belief that you really needed to be in person and in the office and have that water cooler conversation in the morning. And I'm really starting to see more and more that there are ways using technology to bring that sense of team spirit and camaraderie together, even if you're not together in person.
And that's great to hear. I think a lot of us have learned how to alter our management styles in the midst of this. Cool.
And I think that, especially as a woman entrepreneur and, seeing so many of my friends who need that flexibility of, being able to juggle childcare or parental care. Again, in our case, we're seeing so many families where in the sandwich generation where they are caregivers and they are actually relying on us to provide that technology because there are juggling parents and children. And so, I've always been a big believer in saying, listen, go to your kid's soccer game, go pick your kid up from school. If your kid's sick, work from home. And so I felt like I've always hopefully been that kind of leader that's really embraced that and allowed people, trusted people to do the right thing. And I feel like now, we're moving in that direction where, if you want to go for a run in the middle of the day or take a swim or, that there's that trust that you will get your work done.
Mm-hmm. And keep yourself sane by taking a walk or a swim in the middle of the day.
Absolutely. I've got to remind myself of that. It's sometimes as an entrepreneur, we're like the cobbler's children. We don't always take our own advice.
Do you have a favorite way of relaxing?
Well, I've got a new kayak this summer, so I've been trying to kayak a little bit and cycle a little bit. I've been so I've been really fortunate that I've been able to do all that. I've got a little yoga mat going, and the dog seems to be using the yoga mat more than I do some days. But yeah, just trying to get out there and take advantage of being able to slip out and enjoy the outdoors.
Adam and Robbie, what about you?
A lot of time spent watching Netflix, exercise. I like to run, reading. It's been about it over the past couple months.
For me, first off, I try to identify what I don't compromise on from like a self-care perspective, and for me that's sleep. I sometimes sacrifice some exercise and eating, but for me, like I need 9 hours of sleep and then I can just like run all day. So like I try to just like maintain that kind of structure, because also coming into quarantine, it's like you lose a lot of that normal like rhyme and rhythm. So like from an early stage, I kind of like put that in motion, go to sleep same time every night, wake up same time every day. It's a bit monotonous sometimes, but like I feel good. Other than that, like I've been quarantined most of my family in New York, and it's been kind of a special experience in a way because I'm one of 5 and I'm 4 out of 5. So I have 3 older sisters, 1 younger one. There's 12-year difference. And the last time we've all been together, like in a condensed area for an extended period, I was in middle school. I was literally in like 7th or 8th grade. And I was a different person. When you're in middle school, you're just becoming self-aware. I don't know, like it's just you're a different person. Everyone's different people, and we've all done so much growing up, and we're all doing really cool things now. That to have that time together, where like 7:30, 8 o'clock, it's dinner time, and like you put your stuff down, you come around, and we actually sit around dinner table and talk for 2 hours and watch a movie together. It's been a really special time. So for me, like I get so caught up in the grind or whatever you want to call it, with like there's no end to working. It's like so hard to like ever close the computer that it's hard to keep up with all my siblings and my family like on a regular basis. So this like kind of forcing function of sharing a space and having dinner together every single night, I think has done a lot to keep me sane. And I know that's a privilege to say that because there's so many of us, it's like a community. And I know it's different dynamics in different families, but for me, it's been a really special thing.
Yeah, and a good reminder that even as we are in the midst of the grind, which I think is really harped on in the entrepreneurial community, sometimes we have to take time to ourselves. All right, we've got a couple of questions in here, but I do want to remind folks to drop your questions in the chat box as we're moving along. It should be on the right side of your screen. All right, and another question for the three of you. So all of you are startups to watch, which, as I mentioned earlier, means we're predicting big things from in the next 12 months. So as you move forward and you look out as far ahead as any of us can at the moment, what are you prioritizing for the next year?
Well, we're really prioritizing how we scale. So again, we went from sort of 0 to 100 really quickly over the last few months. And so we're really looking at making sure that we're maintaining our quality, training all of our tech concierges, but at the same time, putting those back-end systems and processes into place so that we can really get to where our big vision is, which is to be, again, the sort of the leading provider of tech support and training for older people nationwide. So that's our goal, is to make sure we're not losing that quality, but at the same time, really significantly scaling over the next year.
Ours is pretty similar, looking at scalable growth. So we know exactly where we want to be, what we want to do over the next year. It's just how can we maintain the work output that we've had this summer with a whole bunch of student interns. So we have to look at keeping people on throughout the school year, finding full-time hires, trying to mix part-time in with that, and just figuring that out, because obviously we've never hired people before prior to this. This is our first business. So it's figuring out how can we manage this so we can grow sustainably.
You know, for us, like, I think I have a narrative in my head of like really what I want to focus the story around in our next round of funding. And it's going to be quality, user engagement, and kind of retention. So for like, I kind of, you know, pre-seed round, you raise because they like you and they think it's a decent idea and they're kind of betting big, you know, low valuation. They're like, go build and figure it out. Seed round, you got to show that you have product market fit. And then I think like you go to Series A, and that's when you show you have positive unit economics and you kind of identified the right growth channels, and then you raise Series A, you grow, right? You just pump money into the channels that are working for you. So for me, going to a seed round, it's really a lot on like, so how do you show your product market fit? And for us right now, we started, you know, watching really maniacally our cohorts. So of all the companies we had signed up in June, how many of them came back in July? How many come back in August, September, October? And starting to get some data around like when we get a customer, we know they're going to come back, or here are the indicators that we know indicate that like they're going to be high quality, and we can start predicting LTV. So we can start predicting the value of that customer, and at least then we can prove to an investor, look, there's market need, and our product is addressing that need because look, the customer is coming back every single month. So that for me is I think where we start to kind of hone in a little bit more, and you have to layer that in with like a growth story. So generally the magic number is like 20% top line growth. So trying to grow like our transaction volume, which we get a piece of, like 20% month over month. If we can do that while also showing great cohort retention, we're going to be in a really great place.
Love to hear it. All right, I'm going to move into some audience questions. So first up, we have a question from someone. Why is Rhode Island a great place to launch a startup?
I can take that one.
Yes, Adam.
I feel like that's coming at me. We have all the building blocks of a phenomenal Rhode Island, of a phenomenal startup ecosystem, right? We've got the talent. We have 10 universities in Rhode Island. 1/10 of the population of Rhode Island is university students, and we have world-class universities. URI, phenomenal research school, Bryant University, amazing business programs, RISD, I mean, design programs, engineering from Brown. We have the talent, okay? The cost of living is pretty unbeatable. I mean, you're going to be spending 1/5 or like one half of what you'd be paying in New York or Boston or any other hub. And if there's one thing that the Q has taught all of us, is that you can kind of run a lot of the kind of software businesses you can kind of run from like anywhere, even if that's like your parents' basement. So why would you be spending 5x in Boston or New York or in San Francisco when you can have 5 times as much burn in Rhode Island? So it's all about runway, right? So how many reps do you get to kind of figure out product market fit? And the longer you can stretch out your money, the more at-bats you get. So that's kind of been our methodology. 400K gets us nowhere in New York. We would have run out of money already. We'd be dead in the water, not ready to raise a seed. I'm looking for a job, and now's not a great time to be doing that. So Rhode Island, great cost of living, an amazing community. It's so small. You know, in Rhode Island, it's like, I know a guy, and that's used as like a negative. But in reality, it's like, I met Liz because Liz and I were on the first Brown Angel Group call a year ago. I've seen Robbie and his team kind of come up through the ranks through B-Lab, and I've kind of watched their journey. And, you know, I've seen, you know, Nick and Pat Brown with Rent Sons, and I just like have a really good friendship with all these people. And, you know, you really feel a part of a community. And with that, every win for you as an entrepreneur is also a win for the ecosystem, and everyone's really rooting you on. And as opposed to like New York, where it's so competitive and you're just another startup in the bucket in a city of 8 million people and no one really cares what you're doing. And in Rhode Island, there's just so much interest and so much camaraderie, and you're close to Boston, you're close to New York. I've had days where I go to New York for a meeting, I go to Boston for a meeting, and I'm back in my bed in Providence. I don't recommend it. It's a long day, but you can do it. So I think for all those reasons, it's a really cool place to do. And then the access to capital too. I mean, we were able to get VC money from Boston, and then you know what? We met an angel who has a house in Jamestown. So if you kind of are able to navigate the community, you're able to meet the right people and bringing capital. And Robbie, I know your team. We had I think 4 or 5 startups in the last couple of months actually raised like a $500,000 pre-seed or seed rounds, and that has not been happening for the past couple of years. So I think now is also a really exciting time to be starting Rhode Island.
Great. Now, kind of a follow-up to that question, what resources do other startups in the Rhode Island ecosystem need to be aware of and be taking advantage of?
RyHub. You got to be taking advantage of RyHub. So I don't need to monopolize the conversation, but RyHub is it's a one of the new innovation campuses. You've got Mass Challenge, IBM, URI, Brown University, all kind of put money into the space in the CIC. They run, I think now 3 accelerator programs. They offer kind of alumni and residence kind of things. They have VMS of Rhode Island. It's like they're bringing together all the resources into one unified node, and it's like free to access. So go to like rihub.org, or I'm sure we plug it in the beat all the time. But look at RyHub, a lot of resources there for you, and that's where I would start.
Awesome.
And
Liz, Robbie,
I would just say too, yeah, I would just add that, you know, I've been involved with the Rhode Island entrepreneurship community, and specifically with the Brown entrepreneurship startup community for over, I think it's 15 years maybe since the first entrepreneurship program started. It was very much driven by a student, you know, didn't get a lot of attention from the community or from the administration or even from the students. And so it's been really incredible to see what has happened with entrepreneurship in Rhode Island and around the entire area. And it's so gratifying to see you guys, you know, coming out of the program, but also see the community that's being built and see the mentorship that's happening throughout the community as people are really, you know, paying it forward. And so it's just been remarkable to see that this ecosystem has developed over time, and it's really, really fantastic to see.
I think Adam and Liz both hit it right on the head. It's a great ecosystem, great community to be part of. I'm fairly new to it, but it's really helped our growth, and we're excited to be a part of it.
Love it. And to Adam's point, if you want to learn more about RyHub, just did a profile about how they launched in Rhode Island Inno earlier this week. So later when you go to rhodeislandinno.com, you can learn all about them. So quick plug for myself as well. Another question, where do you all see yourself and your companies in 3 years?
Well, hopefully not quarantined. So hopefully out of the house and meeting in person. That would be amazing. You know, and for us, again, we're really looking at taking a scaling up and becoming even more nationwide, and really being able to serve senior living communities and older adults throughout the country. So that's really, I would love my vision in 3 years is that we're nationwide, that we're the go-to resource, and that people, when they think about tech support, instead of calling their grandchildren or calling their children, they think about calling Candoo Tech.
For us in 3 years, we really hope to be in long-term care facilities nationwide, working with health plans nationwide, and then making that transition from not only being B2B, helping organizations take care of and improve the care for their patients, but also informally for caregivers. So people who are helping out their loved ones, supporting them, using the same kind of standard and quality of care that's being provided in the facility within the homes by allowing people to have access to best practice interventions and tips and tricks and things like that on how they can improve outcomes for their family members.
Pangea.app will be the place to find and work with students, and we will be setting a new standard for how that's done. And the internship is going to feel like such a relic of the 20th century. And if you're doing that and not using Pangea, you're going to be doing it wrong.
Love that energy from all of you. All right, I have a question for Robbie specifically. Given COVID-19, have you seen the need to adapt your machine learning and AI significantly?
Yes, I would say there's a bit more focus now on long-term impacts, especially when looking at things like COPD, which is something that's very prevalent within the population we work with. So how will someone who survived COVID, how will their body respond to that in the future? So those are some things that we've built out models or are working on building out models for, so that we can help mitigate the risks down the line once we beat this and get over this. So how can we kind of reduce that overall kind of systemic suffering that's likely to occur? How can we orient and augment so that we can be a key piece in improving outcomes later?
Great. All right, question for everybody, but I think this is especially going to be geared toward Liz and Robbie. What has been the most difficult part about launching a business months before a pandemic?
Well, we launched actually in February of last year, so we had a little bit of a runway before this hit. But clearly we had to do a quick pivot. Now, we didn't pivot our business model completely, so that was actually really positive. But we in fact accelerated what we thought we'd be doing, pretty far into the future. It was really about making that decision quickly and then really enacting it and getting the team to pivot. And I'm very, very fortunate. I have an amazing team of people that really just rolled with us and said, all right, let's go. We're going to make it work. And, they quickly adapted, and they've been just wonderful to work with. And so I think, that, again, to Adam's point, is it really is about how do you lead, how do you create an atmosphere where people trust you and are excited about creating a future together. And so that's been, that was a challenge early on, but thankfully everyone's in this and just super excited actually about, of course not, this is a horrible situation, but as excited as we all can be in a horrible situation, I think that we've really seen that we can make a difference.
For us, it has been, how do we create meaningful relationships via Zoom? So we just started our outreach campaigns to organizations, finding partners, and it's obviously much better to do in person, so we can actually go into facilities, assess their needs more in depth. Now we've had to do it completely virtually, but it's been more of a process of us getting to know them, doing as much kind of auxiliary research as we possibly can, and it hasn't been, fortunately, that much of a inhibitor up to this point, but I think it'll be a much smoother process for us in this relationship building once we're actually able to go and meet face to face with the people who are providing care.
Adam, do you
I
want to
think
chime in at all? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Liz.
no, I was just going to say, in some ways, it's kind of it's been a bonding experience. So, Robbie, when you don't know someone, like it's always a bit awkward at first, but the fact that you're literally letting a stranger into your home, and they see you with your COVID hair and and the dog barking in the background and people coming and going, and sort of creates that sense of intimacy that in some ways builds that relationship much faster.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
I'll be brief with this one. We were kind of growing linearly in January and February, and a little bit distracted with fundraising. And then, COVID hit, and we've been doing an ambassador program and like trying to send students into classrooms and whatnot, and it was being mildly effective, and we weren't sure why it wasn't working. And then I was down in Miami, Florida at the CIC, because if you're a CIC member, you get access to the CIC in Miami, and it was winter in Rhode Island, and we wanted to get out. We got $100 tickets. So we're down there, and we actually, someone down in Miami thought they were exposed to COVID, so we kind of came rushing back. And it was kind of like right when the whole country in North Sea started going into quarantine. So there was this kind of like pause, this like moment of pause, as like all of us collectively were coming to this realization that like we're in a pandemic, and it's like what life is changing for everyone. And like Pangea kind of like flattened out a little bit. You can like literally see it in our user numbers. And then I remember I was back here in this space, and I called every single ambassador we had with us, and I said, listen, I understand we can't do the same strategy anymore. We're thinking about canceling the program. I know everyone's going through a lot. What do you want to do? What should we do? And without fail, every single student was like, well, I actually see more need for what you're doing now than ever before, and I have nothing to do, and I really need the opportunity. Like, I want to find a way to make it work. And like I went down the list, and we had like all like 60 kids. They're like, I want to keep going. And we ended up transitioning our entire ambassador program to be entirely remote. And the task became like hit up Facebook groups and like post on TikTok and post on Instagram. And then in the span of 8 weeks, we went from 100 campuses to 500 schools. And we 700% increase in like the use on our platform. And then it's continued all the way through the summer, but now we're bringing on a lot of new businesses. This past month, we brought on 150 new clients, and they're all posting projects, and kind of like we're helping students make more money than ever before. So there was that brief moment of pause, and then it's just been this like whirlwind of intensity where it's just like 10 to 14 phone calls every single day, Monday through Friday. And like Friday it tapers off, and it's like my email stops lighting up, and it's like this like moment of like relief. So that's just been a little bit of like what the transition's been like for us in the pandemic. I think that we're one of the few companies that everyone's looking for remote work, and we were a remote work company before it was cool. So now we just kind of we found ourselves in the position where we were called upon to kind of lean in and really provide students with opportunities when they really needed them the most.
Totally. Now, I know that we touched on this a little bit earlier when we were talking about sort of leadership strategies and how we've all grown as leaders. What do you do to keep your people motivated right now?
Yeah, for us, it really comes back to telling those stories of the end users, of the customers. So we're all scrambling all day long and frustrated, and then someone will say, we pause, so we do what we call our can-do moments. So once a week we all get together and we share our can-do moments. And some days people will say, I only had a can-don't moment. It was a terrible week. I was so frustrated. But we'll then come back to someone saying, oh, I helped a 95-year-old person who is totally alone, and her cat just died, and her daughter lives in London, and the only way she's going to be able to get in touch with anyone was getting her an iPad and teaching her how to use it. And so it's these actual moments of, these are actually real people who we're helping with real situations and real inspirational stories that kind of bring us back to saying, okay, we're ready to pick up and go do it again.
For us, we're fortunate to have a group of interns who are all fairly close, all students that are either living together, near each other, just a very tight-knit group, like basically a tribe at this point. So we're working in person all together in the office, and taking precautions, obviously, but we stay motivated by having just team bonding, making sure that everyone's really bought into the vision. Everyone's doing meaningful work that they know that's impactful and they can directly see that impact through their work. And then outside of the office, we play soccer, play basketball, have movie nights, all these other things that just really increase camaraderie that carries over into our work. So everyone's not only being productive, but having a good time, eating lunch together, which has been great to see.
What Liz said, I also think was like super on point, of just like surfacing the little wins, because like all day there's like fires burning everywhere, and you have like half a Poland Spring can, you have like a little bit of water, and you're always like trying to put out fires, and you know, you get like $100 transaction through, and it's like, woo, we did it, you know, and it's like you sell like one chicken nugget, and it's like a big success. So you gotta find those small moments and like surface them, because we are always focused on the fires and what's going wrong, because we want to solve those ASAP, that it's easy to kind of glance over what's working. So I love the idea of the can-do moment. This works brand. I wish my whole team was together, Robbie. That sounds awesome. John, my co-founder, is upstairs right now, so we've been kind of co-working together. And I did make an effort to go back to Providence last week, and we did an all hands, and it was really great. Some really kind of small, tangible things for everyone in the audience that we do to kind of keep us all motivated, moving in the same direction. 14 people, 3 squads, 1 tribe, 3 squads. So we have a product development squad, sales squad, creative squad. And that gives like every pod of like 3 to 6 people like a real sense of like, these are my people. Like, these are the people that I'm on Slack with all day, that I'm like solving these problems with together. And we all work on it together. And I sit on every single squad, so I bounce in every single meeting. Squads like you have your own cadence. So every day, 9 a.m., sales team, me, Casey, Max on a call, and it ends up being like a gossip chat and like a tease chat, and we end up chatting. We talk business, but we have fun with each other. And then every fortnight, every 2 weeks, bi-week is a bad term because it's twice a week, every other week. So every fortnight, we do an all hands. So tomorrow's our fortnight all hands. And all the squads come together, nice big Zoom, and then every squad gets to present kind of what they've been working on, what they presented. And when you do it in 2-week kind of increments, there's a lot to share. And then we kind of go back to our KPIs. I kind of get, here's how we're doing in transaction volume and signups, and it's been good, so that's been great. And then I kind of also use that as a time to, you know, every 2 weeks, there's probably some small like directional change in terms of what we need to focus on. So I use that as a time to kind of return to the mission. What's our goal? What's the most important thing for us, you know, going into next 2-week sprint? And I kind of use that as a point to kind of keep the ship oriented and people kind of pulling the sails in the right direction, so we can kind of adjust course as needed while still navigating towards the same kind of X. And I find that to be really powerful. And we were doing weekly, and that was not effective, but every other week was incredibly effective. And the squad's decision was really, really impactful for us and came at the right time.
I think you're going to single-handedly bring Fortnite back into the lexicon, Adam.
Woo! Not the video game.
Yes, I know. We have time for 2 more questions. So if you could keep your answers pretty brief, that would be rad. First, what would your advice be to newer startups or entrepreneurs who are struggling to get things off the ground during the pandemic?
Well, I would say these small wins, as Adam said, is really important. So don't look at this big picture, we've got to raise money, we've got to get to, this big goal. I mean, start with something really small and achievable and do that kind of proof of concept. And, be able to be nimble, pivot if you need to, keep costs low. And, I think you've got to look at what's going to work in the short term and then what's going to work in the longer term. I just got a note from Resi, which is, the online reservation system, that they're now doing something where they're taking great chefs and they're doing in-house classes, which is great. And that may shift their business model temporarily, but I'm assuming eventually they're going to go back to restaurant reservations. So I think there's kind of a short-term win, and then keeping your eye, focused on what's your long-term vision.
I think while things are so slow, it's a great time to, 1, research, so learn as much as you can, and 2, find some great advisors while people aren't quite as busy. so you can come out of the pandemic when things speed up just as knowledgeable as possible with a great game plan on how to proceed.
All that's great advice. I'll add one sentence. Prioritize progress over perfection. So find small things that you can do that help you move forward every single day.
Yep, it's all incremental for the long haul. All right, last question. This is a fun one, not so startup-y. On a personal level, favorite Rhode Island restaurant, and what's your go-to food choice there?
Oh my God. Well, you know what? I'll give you a little throwback. You know what I was thinking of the other day? I had this waft of this smell coming towards me, and it gave me this total flashback to the silver truck, which was this old truck that used to go up on the hill, and we would have these turkey melts at like 2 in the morning. And once in a while they'd have a fire in the truck, and they would just use a little fire extinguisher and then wipe down the grill and start all over again. So I don't know why that popped into my head the other day, but I have to say that it was probably my most memorable food experience in Rhode Island. Maybe not my best.
I love that.
I have two. I have Mike's Calzones on Thayer Street and Jeff's Superlative Sandwiches on Main Street.
I got 3 for you for 3 different occasions. All right, real quick. Haven Brothers, talk about silver trucks. Downtown, tried and true. It's always there for you when you need it most. 2, summertime, got to go to Iggy's. You got to get your seafood. You got to get it fried. If you're on a date and that's not the move, Matunic Oyster Bar. Get yourself some oysters.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. And thank you so much to our audience members for sticking around for our first virtual Startups to Watch. Now, Inno is running virtual events across the network, so please, please, please check them out. You can go to rhodeislandinno.com to learn more about upcoming events, sign up for the beat, and make sure that you're staying in touch with all things local innovation. Thank you again to our lovely panelists, as well as to our sponsors, Cox, Amica, and Sprout Co-working. Today could not have happened without your help. I have dropped my email in the chat box, so if anybody wants to shoot me a note later, if you have feedback about this event, if you want to connect with me, pitch me your startup, I am all ears.
Thank you, guys. It was great to be part of this, and we're really honored to be selected as one of the companies in this group. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Thank you, Rowan.
Thank you.
Thank you all.